Static crackled through American radios for decades, but nothing blew up the airwaves like Howard Stern. He turned awkward silences into weapons, mined tragedy for laughs, and wore millions in FCC fines like a crown. He mocked grieving fans of a murdered icon, got banned from cities coast to coast, and still rose to become radio's highest-paid king. Howard Stern didn't just cross the line. He tore it down, brick by brick, and rebuilt the medium in his own chaotic image. Love him or hate him, one thing's certain: you couldn't ignore him. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Rule Breaker. Howard Allen Stern didn't grow up looking like the kind of kid who would one day shock an entire country. Tall, rail-thin, awkward, he was the boy in thick glasses who always seemed too big for his own skin. Queens, New York, in the 1960s was loud and tough, but Howard wasn't a street kid. He was a dreamer. While other boys were outside playing stickball, Howard was in his bedroom, imagining himself on the radio. His father, Ben Stern, worked in the recording industry, a voice actor and sound engineer, and had a deep, booming voice Howard admired. But Ben was strict. When Howard got too silly at the dinner table, his father would snap, "Shut up! Sit down!" Those words could have crushed him. Instead, they fueled him. Howard wanted a place where no one could tell him to shut up. That chance came the day Ben brought home an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. It wasn't meant for Howard, but the moment he saw it, something clicked. He started making fake broadcasts from his bedroom, spinning records, pretending to read the news, doing outrageous character voices. His first audience was his mother, who'd walk by shaking her head as her son pretended to interview imaginary movie stars. By the time Howard got to Boston University, he had one mission: get on the air for real. He talked his way into a slot at the college station, WVBU, and instantly started bending the rules. He'd call professors live on air pretending to be a confused student, ask strangers on the street about their sex lives, and slip in sound effects at the worst possible moments. Other DJs thought he was insane. Howard thought he was just getting started. Every time the station manager pulled him aside to say, "You can't do that," Howard felt a thrill. Because if they were mad, that meant people were listening. And if people were listening, he knew he could push further. Chapter 2. Lighting the Fuse. The early 1980s. New York City radio was polished, polite, and painfully predictable. DJs spoke in smooth tones, played the same safe top 40 hits, and filled the silence with scripted, sponsor-friendly chatter. Then Howard Stern walked into WNBC and tore the script in half. From his first day on air, it was obvious. This wasn't going to be business as usual. Most DJs filled the space between songs with light banter. Howard treated the microphone like a weapon, loaded with verbal shrapnel. If a celebrity came in expecting polite, pre-approved questions, they were in the wrong studio. He'd lull them in with small talk, a joke, a compliment, then suddenly drop a live grenade. To Chevy Chase: "So how much cocaine are you on these days?" To Arnold Schwarzenegger: "Do steroids make everything bigger, or just your muscles?" Sometimes the guests laughed. Sometimes they froze. Either way, Howard's audience couldn't look away. But it wasn't just the interviews. Stern packed his show with insane on-air stunts. Games with names you couldn't say in front of your mother, prank calls to politicians, sketches so filthy the FCC's lawyers would practically choke on their coffee. One morning, he coaxed a nervous caller into revealing the strangest place they'd ever had sex, then replayed it over and over for all of New York to hear. The FCC started circling him like vultures. At first, the fines were small, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. Then they climbed into the hundreds of thousands. City councils debated banning him entirely. Religious groups called for boycotts. But Howard knew something the rest of the industry didn't. Outrage was free advertising. Every fine, every protest, every angry headline drove more people to tune in, just to see what he'd say next. Soon, his voice wasn't just in New York, It was bouncing across the country: Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas. Stations fought to sign the guy who got in trouble with the FCC. And in each new city, the pattern was the same. First came the laughs. Then came the complaints. Then came the unstoppable ratings spike. Howard Stern had lit the fuse, and the explosion was only beginning. Chapter 3. The Shocking Moments America Couldn't Forget. By the mid-1990s, Howard Stern wasn't just a radio host. He was a cultural earthquake. Every morning, millions tuned in not for music, but for the unpredictable chaos he created on the air. And some moments became etched into the history of American broadcasting, for all the wrong reasons. Anna Nicole Smith was one of them. She came in expecting playful flirtation, maybe some harmless teasing. Instead, Howard looked her up and down and said bluntly, "You're too fat to be in Playboy." Her smile faltered. The laughter in the studio turned awkward. Stern didn't backpedal. He doubled down. Then, 1995, tragedy in the music world. Selena, the beloved Tajano star, was murdered. Fans were devastated. Vigils sprang up across Texas. But on his show, Howard mocked the grief, imitated her music, and dismissed it as Spanish gibberish. The reaction was nuclear: death threats, street protests outside his station, and boycotts that shut him out of entire markets. It was one of the rare times Stern was forced into an apology. Still, he didn't slow down. When the O.J. Simpson murder trial became the country's obsession, Stern prank called the courthouse pretending to be jurors, joking about the double murder case as the world watched. Then came 2003, the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. 7 astronauts killed. A national moment of mourning. Stern, he played Another One Bites the Dust live on air. Even his die-hard fans were stunned into silence. The phone lines lit up, some calling in fury, others laughing in disbelief. And those weren't the only times Stern pushed the limits. In the mid-90s, he hosted what would become one of his most infamous studio events, the Butt Bongo Fiesta. Adult film stars and models came into the studio, stripped from the waist down, and Howard played their bare backsides like drums while the crew provided live musical accompaniment. It was equal parts absurd, outrageous, and offensive, and it landed him in even deeper trouble with indecency watchdogs. The press pounced on the moment, with the New York Daily News calling it radio's lowest low, while Stern brushed it off on air as just a little percussion practice. Then there was Fartman. At the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards, in front of millions watching live, Stern descended from the ceiling in a cape and mask, his bare buttocks fully exposed, to present an award. MTV executives were horrified. One producer later told Rolling Stone it was an embarrassment to live television, while Stern gleefully declared the next day, "It's not a real award show until someone moons the crowd." This was Howard's secret weapon. He didn't just shock you. He forced you to ask yourself why you were still listening. And for millions, the answer was simple: because no one else on the air had the guts or the gall to say and do what he just did. Chapter 4. Feuds, Fortune, and the Unexpected Shift. Howard's list of enemies could fill a phone book. Jay Leno, Stern accused him of stealing ideas and called him the biggest thief in TV. Rosie O'Donnell, he mocked her weight, her career, even her family life. Kathy Lee Gifford, he sent his fans to boo her in public for years. Even his own staff weren't safe. He'd air their personal meltdowns live, turning his team into characters in an unfiltered reality show long before reality TV became a thing. And yet, the more enemies he made, the richer he got. His book Private Parts became a bestseller, The movie adaptation, where he played himself, opened at #1 at the box office. By the early 2000s, Stern had multi-million-dollar contracts and a radio empire that spanned the country. Then came Sirius XM. No FCC, no censorship, no fines. Howard could say anything. Fans expected the filthiest, most outrageous show in history. Instead, something strange happened. Stern started to change. The man who once humiliated celebrities now welcomed them for long, respectful interviews. He talked openly about therapy, divorce, and regret. He apologized to some of the people he'd attacked. Some of these reconciliations became public spectacles of their own. John Bon Jovi, once a target of Stern's relentless ribbing, personally asked Howard to induct his band into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, saying, "Nobody knows us better." Stern delivered a speech so raw, hilarious, and filthy, it became an instant highlight of the night. And Rosie O'Donnell, after years of insults, returned to his studio to share deeply personal stories, even revealing how she had visited Martha Stewart in prison and sent her a lemon tree when she was released. Some fans were furious. "He went Hollywood," they complained. Others said they were finally hearing the real Howard Stern. But the controversy never really went away. Old clips resurfaced online, sparking new outrage. Critics called him hypocritical. The man who built a career on attacking others now hated being called out himself. Howard Stern was no longer just the shock jock. He was a media survivor, a man who'd reinvented himself without ever letting go of the crown. Chapter 5. The King's Crown. Howard Stern's career is a paradox wrapped in controversy, tied together with a bow of pure spectacle. He's the man who once brought a topless woman into the studio just to play a ridiculous game on air, and then, in the next breath, delivered a raw, vulnerable interview with Paul McCartney about losing John Lennon. He could go from outrageous to deeply human in the blink of an eye. Even his peers admit there's no one else like him. David Letterman once called him the best interviewer in the business, even if he didn't agree with everything Stern said. Rosie O'Donnell, after years of public feuding, admitted in an interview, "He can cut you to pieces on the air, but off it, he's smart, he's thoughtful. I hated him, then I didn't." He's not just a DJ. He's the most fined broadcaster in American history, with over $2.5 million in FCC penalties for indecency, the most banned, the most sued, and yet, still the most listened to. John Bon Jovi once said, "Howard could make you sweat in your seat, but he could also make you tell him things you didn't even tell your friends." Celebrities who swore they'd never go on his show ended up coming back, again and again. Some call him a genius for redefining radio into something dangerous and addictive. Others see him as a hypocrite, the man who built his empire on chaos, only to mellow out later in life. But that's Howard Stern. He's never played to please anyone but himself. Even his critics can't look away. The more you hate him, the more you feel the urge to check in, to see if he's crossed another unthinkable line. That's his power. Howard doesn't chase your approval. He takes your attention and refuses to give it back. Final chapter, legacy and last word. Before Howard Stern, radio was safe, predictable, a neat little box that DJs stayed inside. After Stern, it was dangerous, unfiltered, and bursting at the seams. Jerry Seinfeld once said, "You can't argue with his impact. Every radio show that tries to be real owes something to Howard. Even those who despise him admit he broke the mold." Barbara Walters once introduced him on The View as the most controversial man in America, and still meant it as a compliment. He didn't just break the rules, he rewrote them. He paved the way for every shock jock, every boundary-pushing podcast host, every broadcaster who dared to speak the unspeakable. Love him or loathe him, the fingerprints of Howard Stern are everywhere. And yet, his greatest skill wasn't just saying outrageous things. It was making you care enough to react. He turned listeners into an army of fans and haters, both of whom kept his name alive for decades. He is the king of all media, not because everyone likes him, but because everyone knows him. Jimmy Kimmel summed it up best. Howard's not for everyone, but he's for anyone who wants the truth, even if it's ugly. So the question is Howard Stern a fearless truth-teller who refused to be censored, or just the ultimate provocateur, a master manipulator of the public's outrage? I would like to hear from you. Where do you stand on Howard Stern? Is he a legend who earned his crown, or a relic of an era that's long gone? And if you want more stories that make you lean in, shake your head, and maybe even question everything, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Because the next story might just shock you more than this one.